Welcome back. So today we're going to do a really quick one on the high-end Topping R2R new DAC. This one is the Centaurus. So I do want to thank Apos Audio for letting me borrow this one. And truly, this one was one I just wanted to hear and enjoy. I don't really have any facilities to do hardcore DAC measurements or really have ABs with really high-end DACs. I do have an R2R DAC that I actually use all the time, but this one, I think I just wanted to casually hear it and enjoy it and kind of talk kind of briefly about it. But so what's kind of different about Centaurus among $1,000 R2R DACs? Where does it really stand out? And again, for topping fans, you guys already have a topping amp maybe. This one will kind of fit right into your stack. If you're a topping fan, this is probably the R2R that you would think about picking up. So I think they kind of have that fan base already there, and it's kind of nice to have a solution for R2R. It does have some features which are a little bit different. It does do fully balanced DAC. It does have PEQ, so Topping's PEQ system through their kind of web app is actually pretty cool if you're into that. It does do Bluetooth. It does have a beautiful display. It's about a 2-inch display, which is kind of going on there. And I think the size of it is actually really nice. And for those of you familiar with the Topping standard remote control, you can kind of see it's slightly a little bit wider than the remote control. It's actually a lot smaller than I thought it was going to be, and I think that was actually a huge bonus. I have a ladder R2R, which is actually a huge box. This one is definitely more along the lines of a typical topping size box. It was also created in partnership with Hollow Audio. Those of you who are Hollow Audio fans, you might kind of gravitate towards this one. Maybe you don't have a Hollow or the funds to get a Hollow Audio, but they developed this one in partnership with Topping. It's not really clear who did what and how much of it shares with Hollow Audio, but they do point that out in the marketing, so I will point it out. And it does do your typical oversampling, no oversampling, but Topping added their own version of Best, which is some intermediate version of oversampling and no oversampling, and it tries to determine what is the best. And I think it's kind of hard. It's like it's either oversampling or no oversampling, but then something in the middle is what? It's some form of oversampling, just maybe not as heavy as their no oversampling version, but not too clear. So subjective wise, I would say I had no issues with this one. I love it. I would be happy to never return it. I mean, I basically plugged it in and never switched back to my old DAC, and that doesn't really happen all the time. I think sometimes Apos Audio is really generous and they send me an amp or a DAC, and I'm like, yeah, it's okay, kind of cool, not really as nice as what I already have. But in this case, I plugged it in and never really thought about switching back. So I think subjectively, I love it. I think I have no issues with it. I think it's actually a great little box. If you have $1,000 and are looking for an R2R box, it's certainly one that's up there in the competition. But objectively, I think I do hate the fact that R2R DACs are so expensive, and they tend to cluster around this $1,000 price point. And those of you who, I have $200 DACs, I have $400 DACs, I have more expensive DACs than that as well. And you kind of get to the point where you're like, well, why are every one of these about $1,000? I think Fios is probably one that's a little bit lower. There are some others that are lower, but they tend to all kind of gravitate around this $1,000 price point, and I do find that highly annoying. But I do think that most people just commit to purchasing an R2R DAC and they love it, right? They kind of have their mindset, I'm going to go buy an R2R DAC. That's the only thing I am looking at. That is what I'm going to purchase. And when you buy it, you love it. I plugged this in. I loved it. I kind of get that. I love the Centaurus, but it would be hard for me to point to really a specific area where my other DACs are not sufficient or not capable. And again, what it comes down to is this oversampling, no oversampling. That's more of a preference. And if you read their marketing, they kind of talk about this as well. Which one do you prefer, oversampling or no oversampling or best? And again, it's really hard to point your finger at something that you're paying $1,000 for that is necessarily better. It's just slightly different than what you may already have. It's certainly a different way to go from digital to analog using R2R. But at the end of the day, you're going to run this through some high quality amplifier that you already have on your desk, and it's going to sound mostly similar to what you already have. And to really point your finger at a very specific part of a track, part of a note, part of an instrument that sounds vastly different, I think people just mentally commit to it and say, this is what I want, this is what I'm going to get. And I think those people who say, I bought an R2R and it's my most favorite thing in the world, I have no problem with that. I plugged in Centaurus, and I think it is a great sounding DAC, but it's running through my Topping L70, which is also a great amp, and whatever's behind the L70 is going to, maybe sound equally as great as well. So, I am more of an amp believer than a DAC believer, but I will definitely say that I had no problems just listening to Centaurus as it is. I think it's a great little DAC. But like every R2R, there's going to be implementation issues, and I don't think Centaurus is any different from that. I think the way Topping implemented it is different than some other brands, and those things kind of pop up as issues in other reviews. Again, I don't have the measurements and all those things, so I'm not really going to talk about those things. But how you discover those implementation issues and how you talk about them, that is sort of a little bit of a mystery to me. And I think testing is just harder on R2R, and understanding those things that people point out. I think those are, are those things audible, not audible? How did you figure that out? A lot of those things on R2R, I think, are a little bit mysterious to me. But if you are looking for a more analog style DAC, you're looking for less color, more of something not in a Delta Sigma style DAC, it's better to try one of these as opposed to just reading about it. I've read about a lot of R2R. I've tried quite a few R2R at this point. I don't know. It kind of comes back to this point of, I think people just mentally commit to it and want an R2R, and I don't have any problem with that. I think this is a great box, and it is great to kind of fill that niche of Topping needed an R2R for their portfolio, and this sort of plugs that hole. But again, it's very hard to point to a very specific thing that says, well, this is vastly 5 times better than my Topping DAC. I think that would be a little bit hard to do, but certainly as a box, certainly as a loaner from Apos Audio, I am grateful to have been able to use it for a couple of weeks and very much enjoyed it. So again, no issues with it. A little bit sad to send it back, but very, very nice box. So thank you guys again for tuning in, and I will see you next time.